Before we begin this video, please comment below the country you are watching from. With your help, we can spread the message of Allah and the Prophet across all nations. There's a claim that refuses to die, a phrase repeated in documentaries, political debates, and comedy shows. Muslim martyrs are promised 72 virgins in paradise. It's quoted in headlines, mocked in satire, and twisted by violent extremists as a recruiting slogan. But what if we told you that this claim is not in the Qur'an? What if the idea of 72 virgins is a distortion, ripped from context, based on a weak narration, and misunderstood by both critics and followers alike? Let's take a moment to unpack the myth, carefully, factually, and respectfully. First, we must ask the core question, where does this claim come from? If you open the Qur'an, the central text of Islam, you will not find a single verse promising 72 virgins to anyone. Not to the pious, not to martyrs, not to believers of any kind. The Qur'an speaks of paradise in broad poetic language, filled with rivers, gardens, light, peace, and eternal joy. It speaks of companions of purity, known as hur-in, but without assigning them a number. The descriptions are symbolic, emphasizing purity, reward, and nearness to God. Yet somewhere along the line, this idea of 72 virgins became synonymous with Islam's vision of the afterlife. So where did it come from? The answer lies not in the Qur'an, but in Hadith literature, a collection of sayings attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, compiled after his death. Among thousands of these narrations, a single one found in Sunan at-Tirmidhi mentions that a martyr will be granted 72 wives from among the hur-in. That narration says, the martyr will have 6 things with Allah, and he will be married to 72 wives from the hur-in. But here's where the facts matter. This hadith is weak, da'if, meaning its chain of transmission has questionable reliability. In Islamic scholarship, a weak hadith cannot be used to establish doctrine, especially something as significant as the reward for martyrs. Even if we accepted it as authentic, which many scholars do not, the hadith does not imply that martyrdom is about sexual reward. That's a dangerous and shallow interpretation. The Prophet emphasized that true martyrdom is about defending justice, protecting the innocent, standing firm in the path of truth, even if it costs your life. In fact, when the Prophet described paradise, he said, "In it is what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and what the heart has never imagined." Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. So whatever descriptions we find, rivers of milk, golden goblets, or companions with radiant eyes, these are metaphors, illustrations, previews of something far greater than human language can express. Yet the 72 virgins idea continues to spread. Why? Because it's easy to sensationalize, because extremists use it to brainwash the young and vulnerable, and because critics use it to dehumanize an entire religion. The tragedy is this: something that was never central to Islam, something not even reliably attributed to the Prophet, has become a global talking point, often used to justify hatred or violence on both sides. Islamic scholars, both classical and modern, have repeatedly clarified this issue. That paradise is not about lust, but about spiritual fulfillment. That the Qur'an's descriptions are symbols, not transactions. And that Allah's ultimate reward is His nearness, not sensual pleasure. In fact, both men and women in Islam are promised the same thing in paradise. Whoever does righteousness, whether male or female, while being a believer, we will surely cause them to live a good life. Qur'an 16:97. So let's come back to the real question. Did Allah promise 72 virgins to martyrs? No, not in the Qur'an, and the hadith that mentions it is disputed and not a core part of Islamic belief. What Islam teaches is much deeper, much more beautiful. A life lived for truth, a death with dignity, and a paradise that no human mind can fully comprehend. It's time we stop reducing Islam to sound bites. Time we stop letting myths define our understanding. Because the truth is more powerful and far more sacred. When it comes to the idea of 72 virgins, It's important to start at the foundation of Islamic belief, the Qur'an, the direct word of Allah revealed to the Prophet Muhammad over 23 years. And the truth is simple, clear, and undeniable. The Qur'an does not mention 72 virgins anywhere. There is not a single verse that assigns a number to the companions of paradise. Not 72, not 70, not any fixed amount. That detail, which has gained such worldwide notoriety, is entirely absent from Islam's holiest book. Instead, the Qur'an describes paradise, known in Arabic as Jannah, using rich, symbolic, and deeply spiritual imagery. The focus isn't on carnal pleasure, but on eternal peace, purity, and the presence of Allah. Let's look at what the Qur'an actually says. In Surah Al-Waqi'ah 56:22-24, we read, "And there will be hur-en, like hidden pearls, as reward for what they used to do." The term hur-en appears in multiple places in the Qur'an. It is often translated as pure companions or companions with beautiful eyes. The root word hur refers to brightness and contrast, especially of the eyes, while inen is a plural that denotes wide or expressive eyes. But this is where caution is needed. The Qur'an uses poetic imagery to describe paradise because it deals with a realm beyond human experience. These are not literal material promises, but divinely constructed metaphors meant to convey beauty, peace, companionship, and reward in a language that the human mind can grasp. In Surah Al-Rahman 55:56, Allah says, "In them are women limiting their glances, untouched before them by man or jinn." In Arabic rhetoric, this phrase emphasizes modesty, loyalty, and spiritual intimacy, not lust or fantasy. It's a depiction of tranquil, faithful companionship, far removed from the sexualized interpretations often imposed by modern audiences. Also in Surah Al-Dukhan 44:51-54, we find, "Indeed, the righteous will be in a secure place, among gardens and springs, wearing garments of fine silk and brocade, facing each other. And we will marry them to companions with beautiful eyes." Again, the reward is described in a collective, peaceful setting, a space of harmony and contentment. But crucially, across all these verses, no number is ever mentioned. No 72, no quota, no sensual exchange. This is not an oversight, it's intentional. Because the Qur'an's focus isn't on how many companions you get in paradise. It's on who you become to deserve such mercy. Moreover, the greatest reward in paradise, according to the Qur'an and Hadith, is not physical at all. It is seeing the face of Allah, an unimaginable spiritual joy reserved for those who live their lives in a faith and obedience. For those who have done good is the best reward, and even more. Surah Yunus 10:26. Many classical scholars interpret even more to mean the beatific vision of Allah, the highest reward of all. So when the Qur'an speaks of paradise, it speaks of eternal gardens, rivers of milk and honey, peace with no sorrow, companionship with the righteous, forgiveness and nearness to Allah. And for both men and women, as long as they lived in righteousness, Allah promises, there they shall have whatever they desire, and with us is more. Surah Qaf 50:35. This verse is powerful. Whatever they desire, meaning that the joys of paradise are custom-fitted to each believer, far surpassing any worldly metaphor. The Qur'an never promises 72 virgins. What it does promise is far greater, a realm of eternal fulfillment, peace, and spiritual elevation. Any focus on physicality or numerical reward misses the point entirely, because Janna is not about quantity, it's about divine mercy. And that, in the words of the Qur'an, is a success beyond imagination. So if the Qur'an doesn't mention 72 virgins, where did this number originate? The answer lies in Hadith literature, the collected sayings and reports of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, compiled by his companions and later scholars. These texts serve as a major source of Islamic guidance, second only to the Qur'an. Among the thousands of Hadith, One specific narration is often cited as the origin of the 72 virgins claim. It appears in Jami at-Tirmidhi, a well-known hadith collection. The narration is reported from Al-Miqdam ibn Madikarib, a companion of the Prophet. It reads, "The martyr will receive 6 blessings from Allah. He will be forgiven at the first drop of his blood, and he will be married to 72 wives from among the Hurn." Jami at-Tirmidhi, Hadith 1663. This is the only known hadith that specifically mentions the number 72 in relation to the companions of paradise. However, there are several important qualifications that scholars emphasize when discussing this narration. It is graded as weak, da'if. Many scholars in the field of hadith sciences have classified this narration as weak due to concerns over the reliability of its chain of transmitters. In Islamic tradition, not all hadith are treated equally. They undergo rigorous analysis based on the character and memory of the narrators, the continuity of the transmission chain, the content and consistency of the message. This hadith fails to meet the strictest criteria, making it unsuitable for forming doctrine or being taken as an established part of the Islamic faith. It is not universally accepted. Not all schools of Islamic jurisprudence, madahib, or scholars have accepted this narration. Some view it as symbolic, others as a weak or fabricated report, and most agree it should not be used to define the meaning of martyrdom or the structure of paradise. It's also worth noting that the classical scholars never placed any spiritual emphasis on the number 72. There is no major Islamic creed, Sunni, Shia, or otherwise, that builds its understanding of the afterlife on this number. It is not part of Islamic core beliefs. Even if the hadith were authentic, it would remain a detail, not a pillar of belief. The core tenets of Islam, belief in one God, the prophets, the Day of Judgment, and the hereafter, are grounded in the Qur'an and mutawatir, mass-transmitted hadith. A weak narration like this cannot override the deeper spiritual message of paradise. Islam teaches that Janna is a place of eternal joy in divine nearness, not a reward based on numbers or physical indulgence. When the Qur'an describes paradise, one term that often draws attention, and sometimes misunderstanding, is her-n. To understand what this truly means, we need to step away from modern stereotypes and go back to the original Arabic, and more importantly, the spiritual intent behind the words. Let's start with the language itself. In Arabic, hur is the plural of hara for females, or akwar for males. It refers to someone with intensely white sclera, the white of the eyes, contrasted with deep, dark irises. This was a poetic symbol of beauty and clarity in classical Arabic, not a description of ethnicity or sexual allure. An is the plural of aina, which describes someone with wide, expressive eyes. Again, a poetic marker of charm and radiance. When combined, her-nin, the phrase refers to beings of exquisite, symbolic beauty, created as companions in paradise. But here's the crucial point. These descriptions are not necessarily physical or sexual, not Western virgins. The phrase 72 virgins, often repeated in media and pop culture, is a Western simplification, and in many cases, a deliberate misrepresentation. The Qur'an never uses the word virgin to define jinn. The references to them focus more on their purity, loyalty, and spiritual companionship, not physical intimacy. In Surah Al-Waqi'ah 56:22-24, and there will be her when, like hidden pearls, as reward for what they used to do. This image, like hidden pearls, is not sensual. It's symbolic of modesty, beauty, and value, something unblemished and honored. Pearls in classical Arab culture represented elegance and protection, not sensual objects. According to many respected scholars, both classical and modern, the description of her-in is metaphorical. Imam al-Ghazali said paradise is a place that cannot be imagined with earthly analogies. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah explained that the rewards of paradise are designed in forms our limited minds can understand, but their true essence is far greater. Contemporary scholars like Dr. Umar Farouk Abdallah and Dr. Ingrid Mattson emphasize that these descriptions are allegorical and should not be reduced to carnal fantasies. They remind us the ultimate reward in paradise is nearness to Allah. Everything else is secondary and symbolic, rewards for both men and women. And here's a point that is often forgotten. The rewards of paradise in Islam are not gender exclusive. Allah says in Surah Al-Nahl, 1697, "Whoever does righteousness, whether male or female, while being a believer, we will surely grant them a good life." In Jannah, both men and women are promised whatever they desire. The Qur'an says this repeatedly, "They will have whatever they wish therein, and with us is more." Surah Qaf 50:35. So whether someone longs for companionship, peace, knowledge, or closeness to Allah, they will receive it. In summary, the Hurn are not about lust or numbers. They are a symbol of divine grace, purity, and eternal reward. A part of paradise's beauty, tailored to the hearts of those who strived in faith. Reduce them to sexual objects and you miss the point. See them as signs of Allah's generosity, and the meaning becomes profound. Over the years, the myth of 72 virgins has taken on a life of its own, and not in a good way. What began as a single questionable hadith has become a distorted symbol used by extremists and critics alike to misrepresent Islam's vision of paradise. Let's be clear, the Quran does not mention 72 virgins. Mainstream Islamic theology does not promote sensual reward as the goal of martyrdom, and the true concept of paradise and sacrifice in Islam is far more spiritual, complex, and noble. Terrorist organizations like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and others have taken this myth and weaponized it. They've created twisted recruitment propaganda, promising impressionable young men that if they die in suicide missions, they'll be greeted by 72 virgins in paradise. This is not just un-Islamic, it's anti-Islamic. In Islam, suicide is strictly forbidden, and martyrdom is not something you choose through violence. It's something Allah grants to those who defend justice, truth, and the oppressed, often at the cost of their lives. Prophet Muhammad described the martyr as someone who dies defending his home or family, is killed protecting others from harm, stands for justice in the face of tyranny. Martyrdom is not about killing others. It's about sacrificing yourself for righteousness. The extremists have twisted this into something Islam never taught, and sadly, many of their victims are Muslims themselves, both physically and ideologically. On the other side, Western media has often taken this myth and turned it into a punchline, or worse, a smear. Documentaries, cartoons, talk shows, and news panels have repeatedly exaggerated the 72 virgins narrative to paint Muslims as people obsessed with sex, violence, and death. This is not education. It's not journalism. It's mockery. By focusing on a fringe idea taken from a weak hadith, media outlets have ignored the rich moral and ethical teachings of Islam. They've reduced a profound spiritual tradition to a stereotype. This contributes to Islamophobia, feeds fear and ignorance, and alienates the very Muslims who suffer under extremism the most. Lastly, the 72 virgins claim is frequently used by Islam's critics, especially online, to ridicule Muslim beliefs. They throw it into debates, meme it, use it to label all Muslims as backward or sexually driven. But here's the truth. Most Muslims around the world have never even heard this hadith, let alone consider it part of their faith. Their understanding of paradise is shaped by the Qur'an's emphasis on peace, justice, and divine mercy, not a fantasy number. The Prophet taught that the highest reward in paradise is not physical pleasure, but something much deeper. The people of paradise will see their Lord. Sahih Muslim. That's the real destination. Not 72 companions, but a closeness to the one who created you. To truly understand the reality behind the 72 virgins claim, we must turn to those who have dedicated their lives to studying Islam, the scholars. From classical jurists to modern academics, Islamic scholars across centuries have consistently emphasized two key truths: that the hadith mentioning 72 virgins is weak and not foundational to belief. That the true theology of paradise in Islam is rooted in spiritual, not sensual, reward. Let's break this down. First, let's recall that the Hadith mentioning 72 virgins is found in Jami' at-Tirmidhi, narrated by Al-Miqdam ibn Ma'di Karib. It's been classified as da'if, weak, by multiple respected scholars of Hadith, such as Imam an-Nawawi, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, and many contemporary Hadith critics. This means its chain of narration contains gaps or unreliable transmitters, making it unsuitable for establishing creed, aqidah. In Islam, belief in something must be rooted in the Qur'an or mutawatir hadith, mass transmitted and widely confirmed. A weak narration like this cannot be used as evidence for what awaits in the afterlife, and certainly not as the defining symbol of paradise. Across the Islamic tradition, the true focus of paradise is not carnal indulgence. It is proximity to Allah, freedom from suffering, and complete peace. Imam al-Ghazali, one of Islam's greatest theologians, wrote that the delights of paradise are symbolic and tailored to the soul's fulfillment. He warned against interpreting them with worldly desires in mind. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah said that while physical pleasures may exist in paradise, the highest form of joy is the love of Allah and witnessing His face, a state beyond imagination. Dr. Yasir Qadhi, a prominent modern scholar, has repeatedly stated in lectures that the focus on 72 virgins is culturally exaggerated and distracts from the depth of paradise's real meaning. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf has called the obsession with this myth a spiritual disaster, emphasizing that paradise is not a marketplace of lust, but a reflection of divine generosity. Crucially, scholars highlight that paradise is for both men and women, and both will receive whatever their hearts desire. The Qur'an clearly states, "They will have therein whatever they wish, and with us is more." Surah Qaf 50:35. So for a believer, male or female, the reward is not about quantity or sensuality. It's about being in a state where every need is fulfilled, every sorrow forgotten, and the soul is finally at rest. In the company of the most Islamic scholarship does not endorse the 72 virgins as a core part of theology. The real scholars, past and present, direct us back to what matters most: faith, sincerity, and longing for Allah's pleasure. So far, we've cleared up the myth of 72 virgins. We've looked at weak narrations, scholarly insight, and media distortions. But let's now focus on something much greater. Let's turn our attention to the real paradise, the one promised in the Qur'an. And what we find is breathtaking. A place beyond imagination. The Prophet Muhammad once said, "In paradise there is what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no heart has ever imagined." Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. This hadith sets the tone. Paradise, or Jannah, isn't just a heavenly version of earth. It's a realm entirely beyond human comprehension. It is the fulfillment of every longing, but in ways we can't yet understand. No hunger, no sorrow, no pain, no aging, no hatred, no regret, just peace, endless, eternal peace. Gardens beneath which rivers flow. One of the most repeated phrases in the Qur'an to describe paradise is Jannatun tajjar min tahtiha al-anhar, gardens beneath which rivers flow. This image evokes not just beauty, but eternity, serenity, and abundance. Imagine walking through lush gardens with no fear of drought or death. Imagine crystal clear rivers flowing with sweet water, milk, honey, and wine that brings no intoxication, only joy, companionship, reunions, and rest. The Qur'an tells us that those who enter paradise will be reunited with their loved ones, as long as they too believed, surrounded by righteous companions, people of truth, patience, and prayer, welcomed by angels who greet them with words of peace. Peace be upon you for what you patiently endured, and excellent is the final home. Surah Ar-Ra'd 13:24. There will be no conflict, no enemies, no grudges. Even the smallest hurts from this world will be healed. Eternal youth, radiance, and joy. People in paradise will never grow old. They will be in the prime of their youth, with radiant faces and purified hearts. There will be no fatigue, no boredom, and no need to sleep. Every meal will be better than the last. Every moment will feel like the first time you ever felt true joy. And the best part? It never ends. The greatest reward. Seeing Allah, and then comes the ultimate gift, greater than all the gardens, palaces, and rivers. The Prophet said, when the people of paradise enter paradise, Allah will ask, "Do you want anything more?" They will say, "Haven't you already brightened our faces and entered us into paradise?" Then Allah will remove the veil, and they will see Him, and that will be the greatest reward of all. Sahih Muslim. This was the vision of Allah is the highest level of Janna, a moment of divine intimacy that no soul can imagine. It is the reward not for desire, but for faith, sincerity, and longing.